I forgot that I had to record. I'm not outside. I'm not outside.
Yeah, I know. I told you that. It's right here.
Good evening and welcome to the December 6, 2016 regular Salem City Council meeting, and will now come to order. The invocation will be given by Steve Faber of the Parks Department, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd please stand.
Before I begin, at the request of the mayor on his behalf, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in honor of, in memory of Connie Alexander, who served on city council and passed away recently. She served many years in an honorable capacity. And also a firefighter, Tom Eastick, has passed away recently, and we also want to remember Tom. So if you would just join me in a moment of silence, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the wonderful gifts that we have. We thank you for this season of the year especially, and for the joy that it brings to so many people, the desire to give gifts and to make joy in other people. We are grateful, Father, for the gifts that you have given us in people. And we're grateful for Connie Alexander and for her gift to the city of Salem in so many capacities, as she served on city council and she served various organizations and made the community a better place. We're grateful also for Tom Eastick, who served in the fire department for many years in the city of Salem, and who not only devoted himself to the protection of the citizens, but also serving as coaches and mentors to the youth and giving them positive opportunities to do things and keep them from getting into trouble. We're grateful for those gifts, and we ask that you bless them as they've gone on to be with you. Father, we also pray for Councilman Brown, and we ask that your hand of healing would be upon him as he recovers from his illness. We ask that you would remind him that he is cared for, not just by you, but for all of us here in City Hall and throughout the community. Father, we're grateful for the gifts that we have in each other. We're grateful that you've put us in this community. We ask that your presence would be felt tonight in this meeting, and that as discussions and debates happen, that it would be in a manner that's pleasing to you and it's beneficial to us. Thank you for remembering us. Thank you for blessing us. Thank you for being our friend and for your love that never ends. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Dickey?
Here.
Mr. Gall?
Here.
Mr. Nestick?
Here.
Mr. Knoll?
Here.
Mr. Pepperidis?
Here.
Mr. Whitehill?
Here.
6 members.
President, I move to excuse Mr. Brown for,
Second from Mrs. Dickey. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Pepperidis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Brown is excused. Everyone's received a copy of the minutes from the November 15th, 2016 meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes? Seeing none, they'll stand as approved. We have no petitions and remonstrances this evening, nor do we have any receiving of visitors. Therefore, move on to report of city officials. Mayor Berlin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report tonight, but I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have of me.
Any questions for the mayor? Seeing none,
Thank you.
thank you. Law Director, Attorney Zellers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no formal report, but I would like to wish Councilman Brown best wishes and speedy recovery. Get well, Clyde. That's all I have.
Any questions for the Law Director? Seeing none, Auditor Mrs. Brothers advised me prior to the meeting that she has no report. We'll answer any questions if there are any for her. Seeing none, move on to Treasurer. Dr. Conrad advised me before the meeting that he has no report this evening, but will entertain any questions. Seeing none, move on to Safety Service Director, Mr. Kentz.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mayor Berlin, and members of council. I promise not to drag this one on. I only have one item, just to let all your constituents know that we will be picking up bag leaves through next Friday, the 16th. Because now we're gonna have plows and spreaders on our trucks, so we won't be picking up leaves. And we will not have spring pickup for leaves as well. You know, we have other functions to do, and a lot of people are gonna have to find a different way to get rid of their leaves next spring. So, any questions?
Seeing none,
Thank
thank you. Utilities, Mr. Weingart.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, honorable mayor, just wanted to say that the ordinance number 63 is up before council for the extension of Cunningham Sanitary Sewer North, and announce that the Salem Utilities Commission will meet this Thursday, December 8th at 4 p.m. That's my report.
Any questions for Mr. Weingart? Thank you. Parks Director, Steve Faber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report, but I'd be glad to answer questions that anyone might have.
Any questions for Mr. Faber? Seeing none, thank you. Council Clerk, Mrs. Bricker.
Looks like you don't have anything.
Right. That concludes the report of city officials. We will move on to report of standing committees. Finance, Mr. Knoll.
Mr. Chairman, Finance Committee did meet yesterday. I do not have a formal report ready. Just an overview, we did discuss basically what we discussed in the committee, the whole meeting prior to this one, being the part-time, full-time police dispatchers, adding the addition of the additional policeman for the K-9 unit, and I believe the lawnmowers for the parks.
All right.
And I do have a ordinance for all three readings tonight.
That will be number 64, that's dealing with authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with Hall Community Development LLC to represent the city to administer and implement the city's budgeted portion of the PY 2016 Columbiana County CHIP grant, just so everybody's aware with regards to that. Streets, alleys, and sidewalk, is there any report from?
Mr. President,
Mr.
Mr. Brown has asked that I read the following report on his behalf. Streets, Alley, and Sidewalk Committee met November 22nd. Meeting called to order by Chairman Clyde Brown at 6:30. Committee members Mr. Gall and Mr. Paparotis were present. Safety Director Ken Kentz attended and participated in the discussion regarding East 4th Street. Economic Development Committee Chairman David Nestick and Finance Committee Chairman Andrew Null also attended. Committee member Jeff Gall began the meeting by asking committee to consider naming the rear exit out of Marks for the Zalevi family. However, the committee was informed that the section in question had already been named and noted as Delansky Zalevi Court through its plat. So therefore, no further discussion was held. Mr. Gall asked for a street sign to be prepared and installed, and Mr. Kentz agreed it would be done in the spring. The chairman and Mr. Kentz exchanged comments regarding the paved and unpaved section of East 4th Street that runs east from Holly Avenue. Currently, the paved area stops at a green sign indicating the end of city maintenance. Mr. Kentz said since the unpaved section is not dedicated, it doesn't get paved. The chairman reminded Mr. Kentz there are 5 or 6 dedicated lots with 2 homes addressed to East 4th Street. The chairman also reminded Mr. Kentz that lots are within the city limits. End of the unpaved section discussion. Committee voted to have the section of each 4th from Holly to the green sign added to the 2017 street paving project. Mr. Kentz was asked to remove the green sign, but he refused. Councilman David Nestick was invited to attend the meeting so he could tell the committee why he wanted curbs and gutters added to the paving of North Ellsworth. He referred to the committee the whole session held on September 15, 2015. Phase 2, focus on streets most highly traveled, main corridors. Wants to impact the most citizens. He said we would be going against what we told the people. He gave the committee members copies of the meeting notes. Mr. Gall referred to the cost of doing curbs and gutters and requested we waited another year to see if grant money was available. The chairman commented that no alleys in residential, commented that no alleys in residential neighborhoods were done this year. He wanted to see the alleys done. Mr. Nestick intends to schedule a meeting of the committee of the whole to discuss this issue of doing curbs and gutters on North Ellsworth. Meeting closed at 7 p.m. No additional meetings were scheduled. Mr. Clyde Brown, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gall. Move on to utilities. Mr. Gall.
Mr. Chairman, I have no report, but I will be asking for the second and third readings of the ordinance tonight.
Very good. Traffic and safety, Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. My committee has not met. I have no report.
Rules and ordinances, Mrs. Dickey.
The Rules and Ordinance Committee met November 22nd at 7 p.m. in council chambers with all members present. Discussion started out with a vacant structures ordinance review. We had previously reviewed this ordinance and sent it to the law director for his suggestions about the penalty phase of that. We did go pretty much line for line over the whole proposed ordinance at that meeting, and thanks to the wordsmith talents of Mr. Gall, we did do some tidying up of some of the wording and substituting a few phrases here and there to make it a little more understandable and clear. We also did go through and add to the penalty phase this paragraph that says whoever violates any provision of this chapter or fails to comply therein, or violates or fails to comply with any order thereunder from which no successful appeal has been taken, shall be guilty of a minor misdemeanor and shall be fined not more than $150 per violation. A second violation or subsequent violation thereafter by the same owner at the same structure shall be guilty of misdemeanor and shall be fined not more than $250. A separate offense shall be deemed committed for each day that said violation exists. Penalties for violations under this section shall not be construed as a limitation to any other remedies available to the city. We did determine that we did not want to include imprisonment as part of that penalty, at least at this time. So we will be forwarding this to the law director to draft for our next meeting, hopefully.
All right, thank you.
We also did design review board ordinance. The committee had asked for 3 changes. The first change being to adopt the Secretary of the Interior standards, and after much discussion, Attorney Gall did make the motion for that with Councilman Brown seconding it, and the motion passed 3-0. The board also wanted us to change the ordinance to state that the decision of the board and the Board of Zoning Appeals would be final, and also that the property owners could not opt out. We declined to take that motion at this time, mostly because in the beginning when this all was drafted, it was supposed to be recorded properly as part of the Historical Society, and that did not happen. So there was kind of a consensus that it was really unfair to take further action until those problems had been dealt with, because to say no means no when they hadn't had an opportunity to opt out, or to say they couldn't opt out and now you have to do what we say, just did not seem to be the right action at this time. And so that was the end of our meeting.
All right, thank you. Move on then to Parks, Mr. Paparotis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report this evening.
All right. Economic Development, Mr. Nestick.
The Economic Development Committee did not meet. However, there's an ordinance for reading tonight that I'd like to, wait till the next council meeting, because I received some input from Mr. Pammer that there is some language changes that are needed in that ordinance.
Is that number 62?
That's number 62, yes.
All right, thank you. Committee of the Whole, Mr. Nestick.
The Committee of the Whole meeting met prior to this. I don't have minutes prepared for that yet, but I can summarize briefly that there were 2 topics on the agenda. The first was the addition of a police officer as another K-9 unit,
as a result of the donation of funds for a dog and a vehicle to add a canine unit to the police force. The discussion was primarily around whether the funding exists and whether we add a police unit. And as a result of that offer, the dispatchers had come forward expressing the desire to see another police officer and canine unit in operation, and offered to walk back the request for full-time dispatching or dispatchers. So after much discussion, there was also a suggestion by the dispatchers that their effort and their work be recognized, but with a raise and to stay part-time. So after much discussion, the committee decided to increase the wages of the dispatchers over a period of time, to recognize their effort, to thank them for coming forward with their offer, although the raise that was offered was not exactly what was suggested by the mayor or the chief. It does get the dispatchers up to comparable wages across the county over a multi-year period. The other topic was the 2017 Streets Program, and the committee just reviewed what came out of the Streets, Alleys, and Sidewalks Committee, discussed it with respect to what the Committee of the Whole had decided before the ballot issue was put before the voters, and no action was taken, but they had approved going forward with the sentiment that Ellsworth be done all the way to city limits. And that's my report. I will have to say that we will have to create something that repeals the full-time dispatcher ordinance and simultaneously increases the wages for the first full pay period of January.
I would suggest speaking with Mr. Zellers with regards to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further then?
Nope.
All right. That concludes the report of standing committees. We'll move on to the second and third reading of ordinances and resolutions. Mr. Gall.
Mr. President, I move that ordinance 63 be read second and third for passage, please.
Asking that the statutory rules be suspended so that that can be done.
Thank you.
All right, is there a second, Mrs. Dickey? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Pepperidis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Statutory rules are suspended. Mr. Gall?
Excuse me, I asked the clerk, excuse me, read ordinance 161115-63 for passage.
Madam Clerk, will you please read ordinance number 63 by title only for its second and third readings for passage this evening with emergency clause?
Being an ordinance authorizing the Salem Utilities Commission to advertise for bids and enter into contracts to construct a sanitary sewer extension on North Cunningham Road, City of Salem, Ohio, for the benefit of the TIF district containing the Early Bird Learning Center, and declaring an emergency.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on ordinance number 63 for passage this evening?
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Pepperidis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
That passes with 6 yeas. That concludes the second and third reading of ordinances and resolutions. We'll move on to the introduction of ordinances and resolutions. Mr. Knoll.
Mr. Chairman, I move that council suspend council rules so that ordinance 161206-64 can be considered tonight.
Is there a second on that? Mrs. Dickey? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Pepperidis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Council rules are suspended. Mr. Knoll.
Mr. Chairman, I move to suspend statutory rules so that ordinance 161-206-64 can be read for the first, second, and third reading tonight.
Is there a second on that? Mr. Whitehill? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Paparottis?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
All right, statutory rules are suspended. Mr. Knoll?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the clerk read ordinance number 161-206-64 by title only for its first, second, and third reading with emergency clause for passage tonight.
Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please read resolution number 64 by title only for its first, second, and third readings this evening with emergency clause?
Being a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Salem to enter into an agreement with Hall Community Development, LLC, to represent the city to administer and implement the city's budgeted portion of the program year 2016 Columbiana County CHIP grant, of which the city is a partnering entity, and declaring an emergency.
All right, is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on resolution number 64 for passage this evening?
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Paparottis?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
All right, that passes. 6 yeas. That concludes the introduction of ordinances and resolutions. We'll now move on to the pleasure of council. Mrs. Dickey.
I just want to say that I would like to give my condolences to Connie Alexander's family. Years and years ago, in the early 80s, when I first moved to Salem and I worked as a teller at First National Bank, I can remember the first time I set eyes on her. She whisked into the lobby with the hugest smile on her face I ever saw. She never had a hair out of place. She had the most impeccable, beautiful suit, matching handbag and shoes I ever saw. And I said to the teller next to me, "Who is that?" And she heard me, even though I thought I was quiet. And she came right over and introduced herself. And every time I saw her after that, she knew my name. She asked me how I was. She asked me how my family was. She treated me with such respect and friendliness that I had never seen in someone who looked like her, because she was gorgeous. And then I found out a lot more about her and about her family, and what a wonderful, accomplished family she had, and some of the struggles that she went through to raise that family. And she was such an influence. And she also paved the way for people like me to be on council as a woman, and for a lot of people, black people in the community and the state, to achieve a lot of things that had not been done before her. Even in this day and age, sometimes we forget how much of a struggle it was, even in the early 80s and 70s, and especially the 60s. So I really give my condolences to the family. She will be greatly missed.
Thank you. Mr. Knoll.
I would just like to wish the Quakers luck. I believe all the basketball season is in full swing now, so I know the varsity's at East Liverpool tonight, so like to wish them luck. Hopefully they come home with a victory, and just like to wish Clyde Brown the best, and hopefully he has a speedy recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gall.
I'd just like to remind everybody that on December 1st, the ISO rating for Salem, Ohio went from 5 to 3. And if you haven't personally told your insurance agent that, you need to do such immediately. The differential on your insurance rates should be phenomenal. Chief Mason has been very good about sending out notes to anybody that asks. He sends out copies of the determination, so if your insurance agent needs it, please give the chief a call. I'd also like to say thank you again to Gloria Zamarelli and her crew. They served 600 kids at the cafeteria last Saturday. The gingerbread house, in my opinion, starts the Christmas season. And the work and effort that she and her crew do is just phenomenal. And you saw the front pages of the Salem News on Monday morning, and all the smiles from the kids with Santa. It was just delightful. And speaking of the high school, I think compliments need to be extended to both the administration and the students. As you know, there was a search of the high school with 5 different drug dogs. And not only did they search the school, they searched the backpacks, which was a rarity, and not one single hit. And I think that bodes well for our community, is that the kids realize the danger of those drugs. This Friday, I'd like to congratulate Bob McCullough. He's about to be named the Citizen of the Year for the Salem Chamber of Commerce. Invite you to lunch at the community center to join us in saying thanks to Rob and all he's done for the community. If you haven't taken the drive down Quaker Lane yet this year, get in line. I swear I'm going to put the red container from the Salvation Army at the top of the street and charge everybody $1 that drives down the street, but it is just absolutely gorgeous, and I hope you've taken the time to do that. And finally, I'd like to say something about the gentleman sitting next to me. The final results from the Board of Election was 27 votes. Is the difference between the passage and non-passage of a concept that David has really worked on for the last 3 and 4 years. I hope that he continues to emphasize that all we're doing is asking for a communication, a sit down, a talk about, and David's effort should be noted, and the citizens of Salem owes him gratitude for the time and effort that he took, and I'd like to extend my personal thank yous too. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Paparotis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to offer my condolences to Connie Alexander's family also. She was a wonderful woman. I knew her, and I liked her very much.
Thank you. Mr. Whitehill.
It's tough to follow. First of all, I concur on the appreciation to Mr. Nestick for his efforts on that endeavor. Holidays are a difficult time for loss, so certainly thoughts and prayers are with the families experiencing loss right now with Mr. Brown as far as there is a recovery. I am nothing if not consistent, so I will not disappoint, and I will plug the Snow Queen, which is appearing at the Salem Theater one more weekend. You get a goofy guy portraying a troll, which can be a little fun. But also, my son David has been cast in Beauty and the Beast, which opens in February in Columbiana. And I can't help it, but my daughter Paige has been cast as Annie, and Annie Jr. at Stage Left in Lisbon. That opens January 13th.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Nestick.
Last again, thanks. Appreciate it. First, thank you to Mr. Gall and Mr. Whitehill, but really it's been, the effort was the result of a quality council that we have now. So really the appreciation goes out back out to them too. I want to announce my intention to resign my council seat at the end of this year. I've done my best to try to find somebody to take my place because my work schedule has gotten to be so that it's very difficult for me to be here, during the times that I should be and to put in the effort that I need to. This is truly honorable work, and I really encourage someone in Ward 1 to come forward. I would encourage as many people as possible in Ward 1 to come forward that would be interested in sitting in this seat and provide to the council president, a resume or a letter of interest that council could consider. It's not something that I decided easily, but it's something that has become necessary after 9 years. It's hard because it is such rewarding work, if not, high-paying work. It's very interesting. It's fun to be such a part of the community. Anyhow, I just want to close with that and encourage someone to come forward in Ward 1 so that by the end of this month, I can conclude my term. Thank you.
Thank you. I too send out condolences to the families for their losses. I knew Connie Alexander and got to know her basically through politics. And the the best word that I could find that would describe her was that she was total class. Even when there was disagreements in meetings, she never raised her voice, but expressed her opinion and got her point across. So the community's lost a very nice lady. And with Mr. Brown, I wish him the best in his speedy recovery also. And as to Mr. Nestic, it'll be a loss not having you whenever that time is actually determined, and hopefully we can find somebody to fill your shoes. That's all I have this evening. Council